Imagine surrounding yourself with incredible women who've overcome challenges, they've rebounded after failures and disappointments, and women who are not afraid to shine their brilliance to make a mark in the world. These women support other like-minded women because they know there is plenty of opportunity for everyone and that together we really can make a difference, grow our businesses while have fun along the way. This is what Women in Leadership Podcast is all about. Welcome. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Grab a cuppa of your favourite beverage, pull up a chair and let's get this conversation started. And welcome to another episode. So my guest today says, keep believing in your potential, always trust your gut, and never drink Southern Comfort. We'll ask her in a moment about that. So joining me on today's show is Meg Gluth. Meg, she is the owner and the CEO of Catalynt Solutions, Inc., one of the largest certified women-owned chemical distributors in North America. She's the first female chair of the board of the Alliance for Chemical Distribution, which is ACD, driving industry innovation and leadership. Now, under her guidance, Catalynt was named in the 2023 Middle Market Fast 50 list by Puget, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sound Business Journal, where she was also honoured as a Fast 50 leader. Now, Meg, she's a winner of the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2023, recognising her impact on business growth and innovation. Now, on today's show, Meg's going to share how your starting point shapes, but it doesn't limit your future, why failure can be the foundation of your greatest strength, and how healing leads to clarity, purpose, and growth. So welcome to the show, Meg.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Love what you're going to share today, but as I mentioned in the introduction, never drink Southern Comfort. Why is that?
Now, listen, we'll probably dig more into this, but I was born and raised in the middle of the United States and in sort of a rural farming community. And for those who don't understand, there's just sort of a grittiness in so many ways to the way that we socialize. And we used to drink Southern Comfort. I don't have one good positive story coming from that. Even outside the fact that I am, in fact, a recovering alcoholic, which we're going to talk about today. But beyond that, it's just a bad idea to drink that booze, and I can't. They'll sue me for saying that, I'm sure, but I can't recommend against it strongly enough.
Well, you know what? It's part of your story, isn't it?
Yeah,
and,
it is.
You always can learn, and as you said, you've got some things to share about that, and I look forward to that. I'd love to ask, what led you to this industry? What was it that attracted you?
Sure. To be honest, and I think this is kind of a key part of the themes of my story, I didn't get necessarily attracted to this industry. I ended up in Seattle, Washington, sort of by happenstance. And upon arriving here I'm a lawyer by trade. So I was getting ready to interview at a number of law firms in the area. And in so doing, I consulted with a friend of mine from law school and asked if he knew anybody in the Seattle area that could kind of tell me about sort of the mood of some of these law firms and the environment there. And he said, I don't know any lawyers out there, but I know this guy. He runs a chemical company. You should meet him. If for no other reason, just chat with him about life and what he knows. And so I did. I met up with who's now my predecessor, and at that for a long time was my colleague. And he and I hit it off pretty square away. And he offered me a job as the company's general counsel. That was in 2011 or 12. I can't remember right now, but some time ago. And I instantly fell in love with the business. And I think it's important to say that I sort of fell into knowing him by happenstance. And I fell into taking that job by happenstance. I had a plan. I had a set plan to go interview at law firms. I was going to be a practicing attorney. And I think that this is sort of kind of central to a lot of what I talk about, that I allowed myself to sort of stop and have this gut sense of something important is happening here. And this person is offering me this job. And for reasons that I might not understand with my head, it feels like I should do this. And so I said yes, I accepted that job. And I ended up really, really liking the business. And after a little while, I became the president of the company. And a short time after that, I became the CEO. And then one day I had kind of a wild idea. What if, since, we're talking about business succession planning and things like that, again, remember, I'm still, a legal mind. If I could figure out the financing, would you let me buy this business from you? He and I developed a plan. He thought that sounded good. He and I developed a plan where I would start by buying a majority of the business. And then from there, I would slowly buy more of it in a cadence that reflected his desire to retire ultimately, like how long he would want to stay in the business. And to make a very long story short, as soon as I bought 55%, we had a global pandemic. And his desire to stay in the business much longer after that, he had been through it. He had seen 25 years of struggle, Anne Marie. He had already done that. And he just didn't want to stay and keep doing that. So he ended up selling me the remainder of the business. And so within a year, I became the 100% owner.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting that you mentioned how you just had this gut instinct that there was something quite unique and something quite special. And how often, as women, we often doubt that, don't we? We
Yeah.
don't sit with it for a while. We don't trust that. And I'm sure through continuing to share your story, people will realize how that played out, because I'm sure you wouldn't be where you are today were it not for the experience, the knowledge that you had gained all of those years training to be a lawyer, to work in that
Sure.
industry has really supported you. So I'd love to bounce into the first point where you're talking about starting points can shape but doesn't limit your future. What do you want to
Mhm.
share here?
I think that's a really wise way, frankly, to articulate it, to say that a starting point can shape um, sort of how things go, but it doesn't limit and it doesn't create destiny. I'm very I'll go to the ends of the earth to say that the place that you're standing right now, that I'm standing right now, doesn't have to be the place that we finish. We can make anything we want out of a starting point. And I say that not from a position of sort of motivational speaking or some sort of ignorant hopefulness. I say that from genuine life experience. I felt and was just absolutely determined to work in a law firm in Seattle, and I felt like that was going to be what I did. I went to school for that. I made an investment to be a lawyer. I took the bar exam. I'm licensed in 3 states, which in the United States is not a small task. That's a bad test to have to take. I mean, I expended a lot of myself to do this. And so because of all that effort and because of all that training, I was really wanting to make that happen.
Mm,
And I think something happened inside of me when I met him and went in with the intention of saying, okay, I'm interviewing at law firms. I'm going to be a lawyer. Do you know some of these firms? What experience do you have? Something started to shift in me while I was sitting there with him, where I started to realize that something was happening in this moment. There was an energy inside me that said, you need to pay attention to what's happening. And when he offered me a job a couple days later, I had no logical reason for why that made sense. I did not want to be general counsel at a chemical company. First of all, I was a history major in college. I had no science background. I didn't understand what that would be. And I hadn't made that plan. I made the plan to be in a law firm.
mm,
But for reasons that defy sort of logic, I had this gut sense that I should do this. It's the same feeling of like, when I met him, I felt like there was something I should pay attention to. And I feel that feeling now. And I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity. And you said it, you said, particularly as women, sometimes that lack of self trust and trusting that. And I think um, that'll be my life's work, is making sure that I always have trust for myself and my own knowing in my gut, first and foremost, above all other things.
mm,
Ultimately, this was that. It was trusting that I knew something. When I started, I didn't think that I would be here for all that long. I just felt like I needed to come and do this, and I thought maybe I'd learn some skills. Maybe I would, learn something about what it is to be in-house counsel, and that I would glean something from the experience that was more a contribution maybe to my resume, and then I would go back into the law firm world. And as we all know, that's not what happened.
As you're sharing your interaction with this gentleman who you went to ask more information, you mentioned there was just something special about that person. One of the things I'd love to ask is so many times I've heard and continue to hear women say that mentors in their life have been so um, well, career defining. They've been supportive throughout their career. And then you have other women who have not really either sought out or had good mentors around them. So it sounds like this gentleman was a wonderful mentor in all ways. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, he never set out to be my mentor. And I think that's really important because he was a businessman and I worked for him. So for a while, I worked for him and alongside him, and we were colleagues. And I was, the very nature of general counsel at a company is to be a trusted advisor. I was in a lot of rooms with him, sifting through a lot of information that you kind of only do with your lawyer. He wasn't mentoring me. He was expecting something of me. I was there to provide a service and a value. What I gleaned from that was watching the way he moved in the world and watching the way he moved in business. And I made him a mentor almost without his knowledge for a while. And this is important too. I learned as much from his mistakes as I did from his wins. Both things for me were so enriching to my life. And I think had I said to him, "Now you will be my mentor," he maybe would have shielded me from from some of that. But in him just being a human being and me doing the same, we both frankly learned a lot from each other. And he has been absolutely instrumental in my professional success.
Yeah. I so agree with what you've said there. And I love that you said that because some women may be listening thinking, well, I don't have a mentor. It doesn't have to be a formal mentor. It can be observation. And I'm sure there are many instances that even in some of the decisions that he made or other people make can be a great lesson to you
Yeah.
as well. You can glean just through observing how they do business. You know, as we were talking more and unpacking the point about how your starting point shapes but doesn't limit your future, what I want to pick out from that, which will segue beautifully into the next point, why failure can be the foundation of your greatest strength. You know, as you go through business and life, there are ups and downs. And so often when we hit a challenge, as you mentioned, the pandemic hit right in the middle of when you were, transitioning to take over the company. That could have been seen as, well, this is an end point. But
Right.
for you, you didn't. You kind of looked at it, well, this can be another starting point. It's not going to limit my future. What do we need to change? How do I need to look at things differently? And what actions do I need to take? So what are some insights and learnings? Because hindsight, I think, is a great teacher, that failure can be the foundation of your greatest strength. How was that for you in your situations?
You take the example of the pandemic, and it's a perfect example because a lot of things came to me, lessons as a result of that, frankly, to the whole world. But I'll start here. I was a brand new business owner. And I will say this, I want to be really clear. I was the company's general counsel, then president, then CEO. I was very well intimately versed in what happened in this business in all segments. But there is something different that happens to you when you become the owner of the business. And the level of responsibility and the level of obligation and frankly the level of financial debt alone is crushing in so many ways. So when you think about that weight and then you think about just 2 months later, at that time the United States government basically said you don't get to work anymore, or we don't know what to do. We're sending everybody home. States were shutting down schools. Business was going to take an absolute hit and we had no idea what to do. There was no example in history for how to handle this. I had a mindset at that time from necessity of I cannot fail. There wasn't an option. I was raised below the poverty line. Everything that I have here, I'm personally leveraged on. There's no rich uncle in my story. And so for me, there wasn't an opportunity to sit and wallow and wonder what I was going to do. I literally simply could not fail. And so I think that in hindsight, when I look at that, Anne Marie, that wasn't something I chose. It wasn't to like, okay, now I will get up today and I will have a can do attitude or a do not fail attitude. I literally moved so many days out of my desperation isn't the right word, but just like this has to work. This just has to work. There is no other option. Failure is
Absolutely.
truly not an option.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though, because so often when we are in situations, it's often the inability to make a decision or the the getting stuck, you know what I mean? In the woe is me. I'm not saying that, people do that, but
Yeah.
the way that we look at things can really impact our psyche, and our psyche can often become our reality because
Yes.
we're not doing certain things, or we're doing things that we really shouldn't be doing. So you were really focused, and it was like, there's no other option. This is going to, and you drove forward. So what would you say then to someone, Meg, who may be going through a situation where they think, "Oh, I don't see a future. There's been a real block in the road."
Yeah.
What would you say to her?
You know, I try and stay away from like pithy quotes and things like that because I think life actually has a lot of nuance, and nobody going through listening to your podcast right now going through a hard time wants to hear me say some canned statement. But I will say this, keep going. And I will also say that there are two options and two outcomes. There's never failure. There's either you win what whatever you're facing, you win, or you learn a lesson, and that's also a win.
Mm,
And I can say with personal experience, we made it through that pandemic situation, and actually we really excelled. We made some changes to our business, and we because failure was not an option, we did things that proved to be really, really successful. But just last year in 2024, we had a horrible year. It felt horrible to me. And I mean, there are worse things. You can even hear the dramaticness of that in my voice. I shouldn't be like that with it. I just feel um, like, man, last year was a fight. And I have been spending time with my own mindset about that, my own relationship to decisions that I made and wish I hadn't. And, things like that, like, oh, could I made that easier? Could I have made that better? And what I'm learning, and the advice I would give people, is that there is no better, there is no worse. I have two opportunities. I either succeeded at achieving an objective, and I did succeed last year at several objectives, or I'm learning a lesson today about how to handle that for next time. And that's also a
mm,
win. And when you look at it that way, when I look at it that way, it turns me into being the role of somebody who can do something with what I've got in front of me. In the worst case scenario, if you have a podcast listener whose business is going bankrupt, you could even look at that bankruptcy and say, this is an opportunity for me to learn something
mm,
from this. If you look at every experience as a teaching moment, which it is, you can glean something from that. And the very shift of your mindset can make a difference in a number of areas of your life. So I think
mm.
for me, it's been being very, very clear about everything being either a win or an opportunity to learn something, which also becomes a win.
Yeah. You mentioned about lockdowns and things like that here in Melbourne, which is where I'm based in Victoria, Australia. I believe that we have the title, not that we want to have this title, the most locked down city in the world. And there were small businesses who we just felt who were in-person businesses, the
Yeah.
online businesses, didn't have to change too much of the way they were doing their business. But I felt sorry for businesses, small businesses, mum and dad businesses who, for instance, florists who were told, well, now you can open up. And it was heading to Valentine's Day, which I believe is one of the largest income generators for floral businesses. And a day before Valentine's Day, or a couple of days, they were told you need to shut down. So there's stock there, there's this, that, and the other. And I'm sharing the story because it's innovation, and maybe you might want to share some of the innovative things that you did. So what one business did with all of this stock, thinking how on earth, they went online. I don't know how they did it so quickly. They obviously had a great team. They went online, so people were able to order flowers, and it was delivered to the people. And now that has become quite a significant revenue generator for them. Had it
Yeah.
not come out of a situation of what do we do now? Do you have an
Right.
example of something like that in your business where you really looked innovatively at how can we find a solution for this?
Yeah. Listen, we've had every kind of trouble you can have. And I think you could say that really in any business. I mean, I tell people all the time, you want an adventure, own a business. You'll have problems you never knew anything about. You know what I mean? I can tell you about things that I never would have intended to learn about. But it's similar to the way that you're talking. So, for example, we had one day everybody was coming to work, and the next day no one could leave their house and come into a business. And like every other business, um, even though we didn't have a front storefront facing proposition, we had to figure out not only how to equip these people to have home offices with, by the way, children and dogs and their spouse and all of this chaos behind them, but we had to figure out how to maintain the sense of unity of purpose and being able to get things done. In our business, we're moving a lot of goods all over the world. The logistics, the timing, the communication with customers is critical. And so we had to figure out a way to literally revamp the way that we work. Different people working in different time zones, working different hours, different people doing different kinds of jobs. Printing checks. How do you print checks when no one's at the office printing checks? All of this we had to learn how to do all of it. The takeaway from that, Anne Marie, is that now our business can do anything, anywhere. We have all of those stop gaps and those backups here. Now, we have still chosen to come back to the office, at least hybrid, part of the time,
Yeah.
because I still believe that people being in the same space enables a kind of collaboration that you can't always get, working from home. But we know how to do anything from anywhere, and it increased confidence at the level of every employee as well in saying, okay, I can do this. I can figure out how to do my job from any place, and how to be a great parent, and how to share a
Mm,
home office space with my spouse, and how to do this, and how to do this. And people just had a higher degree of confidence and a higher degree of efficiency, frankly. We had people who were sharing home office spaces with a spouse who was also working from home. You get it for 4 hours, I get it for 4 hours. And they became efficient, and they became really dedicated to what they were doing quickly. And so it brought about an ingenuity in the business that now carries over into every other problem we try and solve together.
yeah. When you think about resilience being a muscle, it certainly got a huge workout, didn't it? But what it did do, and I think you mentioned it earlier, and I think this is so key to mention, it was around the mindset. If you go forward with the tenacious, or whatever you might want to call it, was this is not, there's no plan B. We move forward one day at a time. We make a decision, at that time, the best decision with the best resources we have available to us. You move forward. And then, people had to, and I hate to use the word because I know a lot of people said, I'm never going to use that word again, but pivot, do things
Yeah.
differently. But if you did do that, you realize, you know what? I have learned things. And, often you might think about a block or so forth as a, this situation as a block stopping me from moving forward. The building of that resilience muscle, people have stepped up into the block and realized it's a stepping stone to the next, to the next,
Yeah.
to the next. And it's
Yes.
all in how do we look at that? How do we look
Yes.
at the situation? How do we move forward? So thank you for sharing that. That leads us to the last point around how healing leads to clarity, purpose, and growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I talk a lot about this. So now I'm in this place where I run a company, and I don't really, in a lot of ways, I don't have to answer to a whole lot of people. And so, I mean, I do. I have stakeholders in my life and in my business, but I can move in the world with a pretty high degree of honesty and transparency. And I talk a lot about the fact that I struggled with addiction early on in my life, particularly alcohol addiction. And I guess this kind of ties into the first part of the conversation, this concept of saying you can look at something as a negative, you can look at something as a failure. Many people would call that a personal moral failure, or a failure of willpower, or however you want to describe that. And I'm not so much interested in the way that people who are on the outside looking in describe it. I'm more speaking to people who might be in it themselves.
Mm.
um, because I think when you're in something like that, you can feel like a failure. It can feel like a real shortcoming on your part. I looked at that experience, and the day that I decided to stop living like that, as being such a messy day and a very uneventful day in so many ways. And in fact, not at all with a plan. I didn't know how to be sober. I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't all of a sudden clean my life up. But I made one small decision to do one very big thing differently. And that started a cascading effect of healing so many elements and aspects of my life that if it were not for my doing that, I couldn't be sitting here with you today. Not even because of the alcohol, but because the woman that I became was a woman who looked head on into struggle, into challenge, into past pain, and said, I won't let you control my life anymore. That attitude and that posture comes with me into my business every single day. And as a
Mhm.
result, I deal with myself and my business and my colleagues and my stakeholders with a high degree of authenticity, with integrity, and with an attitude of saying, whatever this is here, we can heal this. Maybe
Mhm.
not so much in the personal sense of the word, but we can rectify what's happening. I walk
Yeah.
into rooms where we have conflicts and I say, what's going on? What do we each want? Let's figure this out. This doesn't have to be difficult. And I think that kind of attitude can be really transformative beyond just the thing that a person is healing from.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that approach. And I mean, one of the things that I'm sure people will have recognized is the industry that you're working in is quite male dominated. And so, do you believe that as a woman, the way that you bring empathy, compassion, all of the things that women bring to the table has really supported you in really carving out the space as you as the leader of your business in a industry that is primarily male dominated? Would you say
For
that's
sure.
true?
For sure.
Mm.
I've been really out front with my empathy and with I think women are very intuitive. Women leaders can very often have a strong gift of not only empathy, but intuition. When I say trust your gut, I find this is just in general, like a lot of women that resonates with them a lot. And it always is interesting to me that that's the case. But I think what I'm bringing to the table is not just, hey, women leaders have empathy and we have intuition. We're also tough as nails. We have all the other leadership stuff too. If you
Yeah.
don't believe me, watch a woman. Yesterday, I left a long day at the office and I had a call with a stakeholder in Singapore 2 hours after I got home. I made dinner and bathed two children in that time because I wanted to be there with them and I wanted to be the one doing that. I'm not saying men don't do that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we used to say that that somehow meant a woman was distracted or less than or of divided mind. And I'm saying no, that's one of the most badass things we do. We manage so many things in so many different places and we're doing this with empathy, with grit, determination, fierceness, wisdom, and also that intuitive, maybe a little more soft side.
Yeah.
You can be soft and hard at the same time.
Yes. In actual fact, I recall a story many years ago, decades ago. I was in the career industry and I worked with a young woman who had always been involved in the construction industry, which is male dominated. And so she started specializing in her degree was in the area of workplace, not harassments, but workplace issues. And so going onto sites, stopping sites and things like that, which is primarily very difficult if you've got to walk onto a site
Yeah.
for work care issues to say, we need to shut your site down. But she had been able to develop because of her communication skills rather than, say a male approach would be to march on the site, shut everyone down and that's it. But she developed relationships with the foreman. And so together they were able to come up with great solutions. And so the style she still was able to if she needed to, she would just state what the reasons were, but they respected her. And I
Yeah,
think that's the difference, isn't it? And that you
it is.
said that to yourself so beautifully. When you walk into a room and there is a bit of conflict there, rather than going in gang ho, I don't know if you've got that
Yeah.
saying in the US, but you do. Do you
Yeah.
know what I
Yep.
mean? Yeah.
I do. I do.
It is what's going on here. We
Yeah.
all want the same thing. Maybe we're looking at it differently because there's a different approach. But let's communicate and come up with something that we can both get behind. And I think
Yeah.
that is that kind of strategy or tactic or whatever you want to call it, that communication skills, if that was used more prevalent around all industries, I think we would come up with more collaboration rather than
100%.
confrontation. And I think
Absolutely.
women can bring that in. And I think even if you think of the courses and the books that is talking about how to be more empathetic, how to do this and that.
Yeah.
It's not a soft skill. I can't remember
No.
what's one of my colleagues said. It's actually a crucial skill,
Yeah.
especially if you're negotiating with people from different backgrounds and different beliefs and values. Let's come to a common agreement where we can both work
Yes.
together, all work together. And
Understanding
support.
what somebody wants or needs in a deal and why it is that they want or need that is just good business sense.
Yeah,
It might
yeah,
also be empathy, but if you don't understand that, you're going to circle the drain
yeah,
forever before you
yeah.
reach a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we end the show, I want to share something. I'm smiling because it reminded me of a training that I was told by one of my clients, and she trains in retail in empathy and so forth.
Yeah.
And so these youngsters, millennials and so forth, were given it's like scripts, but it was kind of showing them examples. And one of these young men actually said if this was just a role model. He said, "Well, now I'm going to show you some empathy." That was the script. So interesting. And I had to laugh. I had to giggle when I heard that. But it is such a key skill, and so often we go back to the point where trusting your gut, trusting your
Yeah.
instincts. Women so often have been taught or misunderstood that that's not actually a good thing. Using empathy, all of those things, alongside being able to be direct, being able to
Yes.
be all of those things is such a great skill set, I think, to have. So is there
Absolutely.
one last thing that you might like to share to a woman leader or maybe someone who is in the transition of taking over a business? Would you like to leave one last insight before we finish the show, Meg?
Yeah, I would just say to them, you know what you're doing. You wouldn't be here if you weren't someone who knew what to do. Like you know what you're doing. That's why you're here. You have everything you need in this moment to do what you need to do, and just trust that and go with it.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. If someone is listening and would love to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to connect and to find out more about your
Yeah.
business?
They should just come to my website, www.megangluth.com. From there, you can find all the ways to get a hold of me. And I think, we have a high degree of responsiveness there. So that's where I would start.
Fantastic. Well, thanks once again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Anne-Marie. Before I go, are you a coach or a consultant who feels like the world's best kept secret? Your experience is vast, yet secretly you're frustrated because despite all of your hard work, you're just not getting the visibility, leads, or new clients you'd hope for, and you don't know why? I've created free training and resources that'll help you build visibility, generate leads, and enroll dream clients with ease because you're seen as a trusted authority, even in a crowded marketplace. And you've positioned yourself as the choice versus just a choice with your unique, uncopyable, and unforgettable brand and message. And you're able to nurture listeners into leads from your podcast, even from your first episode. To access these free resources, go to ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community. That's ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community.